I think leaders have to provide purpose and direction to a company. I think you do that in two ways. I mean, the first part of that is you need to be able to put together a team that helps define and sift through the strategic tea leaves. So you have to be a strategic tea leaf reader on the one hand. And on the other hand, you have to be a cheerleader. You have to get the team motivated, enthused, excited by the possibilities that those tea leaves show you. So it's a huge position of responsibility. Of course, leadership isn't something just for the chief executive. It's for every one of us has a leadership role in the sphere in which we actually influence. But taken back to its core, it's about both those elements for me. Chief executive, you set the tone for the entire organization. You're the one that's actually saying, come on, let's trust in each other. Let's go forth and make this particular direction happen. And you have the responsibility to, weigh up sometimes what seem to be almost insuperable competing different types of energies and opportunities, and it's your job to pull that all together and to help the team get somewhere. But even if you are the tea lady or you are the head of a testing team, your responsibility in how you execute something is also about leadership. You can take a view that says, I'll give agency, purpose, or I'll wait for somebody else to tell me how to do it. Or you can say, no, actually, I'm going to set the new standard in that. And so in every one of those ways, we have our own leadership. It's interesting. I mean, at the age of 4, I knew I was going to be a lawyer. I played in the waste paper bin under my father's desk at his law firm, and there was a woman partner of his, and she used to bang her fingernails on the desk, and I just knew that I would one day be at that desk. And our conversations as a family, I'm the eldest of 4, were always, about law, about justice, about rights, about people less privileged than ourselves. That was the dinner party conversation. In fact, forget the dinner parties. It was our family evening meal conversations all the time from a very, very young age. And as I progressed, I did 2 law degrees. My father was, as it turned out, killed in a farming accident just a couple of days before I graduated with my 2nd degree. But he had retired at the age of 35 and moved the entire family from Johannesburg to the Cape. And my mother became a professional farmer on our family farm. So I grew up, on the one hand, with this huge discussion about responsibility and others, and on the other hand, watching my mother get up very early in the morning, drive the tractor, negotiate the peach prices, organize the men on the farm, pick the fruit. Hard work, really hard work. There was nothing ever a conversation about women couldn't do. It wasn't women's place to. In fact, I saw every day a woman doing something that was valuable to our family and valued in our family. And so I think I'm just unusual in the sense that I had this obvious role model. And so I don't define my journey in terms of gender terms of having to get over a hurdle. In fact, I just knew I would be able to do whatever I wanted to do. And then I did my indentured labor, otherwise known as articles, at one of the top law firms in the country. And then I did my master's. And the very, very first day of my articles, I was working with a partner who, at the law firm. The very first client I ever took a phone call about was the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. I thought I would be a human rights lawyer or a mining lawyer, something along where my father had been. That's what I was exposed to. But my very first client on day 1 was the Stock Exchange. And so I think, really, if you put these two things together, I've probably been training my entire professional life, in fact, most of my life, to do the job that I do now. And then I did my master's, and I came back, became a partner at the law firm, and then was asked by Roy Anderson, at the time the JSE's what we called president, but chief executive, to come and join the JSE. We were sorting out some massive disciplinary cases against some brokers. And I did that, and 6 months later, Russell Loebscher joined. And 3 months after he joined, he said to me, "Now, Nicky, I think it's time for you to think about coming onto my executive, but you do understand you're going to stop being a lawyer." Well, and you can imagine, I have 3 law degrees, 6 years of legal training, a massive debate about, is this worth giving up? both within my family and for myself. But to be frank, I've been given huge responsibility at a very young age. Been a bit scary sometimes. People backed me. I didn't always do great in everything. I made my fair share of mistakes, but I had strong people saying, well, that's how we learn. I hope I'm that sort of lawyer too. But those responsibilities, and if you stack them up one after another, have essentially sort of added to the substance that is Nicky today. And then my career in the JSE has just really been built off that. So when you're a lawyer, you're trained to think, I would say, almost linearly. To analyze a problem statement and you solve it like this, A, B, C, D. Well, real life is a lot messier than that. And when you look at management, actually, it's about taking inputs from various people on the one hand, if you're trying to, for instance, solve a problem, and then decide how, in your real life, you're going to use that input to solve the problem. It's a lot messier. And that is really the big jump, I think, between being a lawyer and being a manager. And then, of course, there's the additional and very exciting parts. The higher up the managerial levels you get, the question of strategic courage, looking in the future and sifting those tea leaves and saying, I think we should be doing this, and then getting those inputs again, putting them together and saying, well, we'll make that decision. Managers really ultimately have to take responsibility for a decision, whereas if you're an outside lawyer, you're advising, and managers will sometimes take it or not take your advice. But ultimately, different things motivate you, but your skills, the skill set that I had trained so hard with, are part of me every day. If you track back the really large moments of the modern times where the JSE's transformed, you can actually go back all the way to early 90s, 94-ish. And in 96, when I joined, in fact, the week I joined the stock exchange, we closed the floor. I had done the legal work for the JSE at the time, and most people today won't really remember that, but that was a huge moment for the management team at the time. I was outside the JSE, but doing legal work for them, to get all the stakeholders to realize, you know what, we're not going to gather on this floor and shout at each other. We're going to do this on this thing called a computer. People are going to have to learn completely different skills. It's going to be completely electronic. You've got to get people over the fear of the future and change they don't understand and can't predict. So that must have been an enormous thing, and I have a huge respect for the enormous courage to move into a new world. Because when you realize and you operate in our business can't survive as a center of excellence in the southern part of the African continent. We are completely globally connected. Today, perhaps more so than then, but at that stage, they knew already that there wasn't a world for this country disconnected from its trading partners in the global financial markets. And so that was the first step. When Russell Loebscher joined and I joined his executive, we started this process of essentially then taking the modernization of the JSE to the next level. And then it's all about, you've got multiple exchanges in the country, all operating slightly differently, not on the same technology, not on the same levels, a little bit expensive and old school. We've got to increase the speed of what we do. It's all about, we talk about turning the dial. Every single day, you're trying to do what you do better, faster, cheaper for the clients, more trusted, more secure, etc., etc. And that's really the journey. I've been at the JSE now 21 years, almost to the day. And we now, we today still work every day on saying, how do we make it better? Because that's what our clients should expect. They should expect a trusted marketplace that for anything they want to do is world-class, same level, if not better, that you will find in England or America, etc. From a regulatory perspective, from a technology perspective, from a people perspective. I talk in terms of people don't owe us a single cent. We earn their business every single day, and trust is at the center of that, and you earn trust by doing what you do consistently. Ultimately, you get further by having better people than you around you. So as a leader, your first job should be to hand select people you think will push you and the organization to be better. So I have people around me who are better educated than me, who have better skills than me in certain areas, etc. So you want the best talent you can possibly hire. You want diversity in all of that talent. It is, I think, a cardinal sin to have people that look like you, have the same qualifications you, the same age as you, the same experience as you. Really, diversity is a competitive advantage. It's actually interesting to me because in this country, we tend to relegate diversity to something on a scorecard, when it is something we come to the table naturally with. People, you're as different to me as I am from Samkele. We are going to be completely different. Well, if we're going to tackle a problem, if you have very, very good people tackling the same problem from different perspectives, we're going to end up with a richer and more creative solution. And it's that diversity that actually sets us apart from others, we think, in our business. It's firstly about your academic qualifications and your skills. It's also about exposure to other world-class competitors and thoughts, etc. But to be honest, you can never actually just rest and say, I found the right team now. This business is moving so fast. Our industry today is different from what it will be like in 3 months' time. It's probably even too long a time frame. So I'm looking for my people to keep on top of things, to keep pushing the end of what is possible for us. And now that's much easier said than done, because a big institution like ours relies on providing its client a promise that we will do the same thing the same way every day. They can trust that. Well, at the same time, I need to shift it. So you can see there's a natural contradiction in that. And finding people who feel confident in that contradiction is also quite a challenge. Some of us don't like change, don't like ambiguity. You've got to find these different, I would almost say, 21st century skills. And you've got to keep pushing people not to be complacent if you are one of the largest in your industry. It's very easy to believe, even if you don't articulate it like that. So it's very easy just to settle back into well, they must use us. I mean, we are it's a fatal error that. So you've got to have that hunger, that fire, that real knowledge that if you don't do it as well, if not better, tomorrow, you may not have the next day. We have a view at the Exchange that innovation isn't about something you clog on the outside or you have a team that does innovation. What we're trying to get to, and I have to say, I'm not sure we are yet at the level we'd want to be, but is to embrace the concept that you have to change. Every day, if you do things better, you are by definition innovating. It doesn't necessarily have to come with that ticket innovation or a big spend innovation or a tagline that is new. But it does have to be different and it does have to be better. And so that's how we think about innovation. It's that consistent turn of that dial so that it is something increasingly world-class. So I never set an objective for myself that one of those badges I would need is to be the CEO of the stock exchange. I had been at the stock exchange, I think, nearly 15 years by the time I had been approached to be a CEO. And obviously I was thrilled. It's an enormous privilege and responsibility. I was the deputy CEO already for 8 years. I worked with an amazing predecessor, very brave, very supportive. I had a board that was, had walked a big journey with the executive, and I'd been part of that journey. I had really been at the cutting edge of things that mattered. The stock exchange is a very special place. So the first thing was, wow, that is an enormous thing to be offered the opportunity to be the CEO of the stock exchange. It's not something that you have a possibility even of letting your guard down on any given day. The country, ordinary South Africans, have a right to expect that we will do what we do in a manner that they can trust every single day. That's an enormous responsibility. So I did reflect before accepting the role on, was I up for that? What would matter to me? What was the promise that I could bring to the board about what I would help the exchange get to? And what we've really focused on is saying, how do we integrate our business so that our customers working with us can do that much more efficiently, much more cheaply, that our technology across our product suites is just world-class, that we are deeply embedded in areas we were never in a serious way before. And we've made really good strides in that regard. And we're about to embark on the next really big leap, and that's extremely exciting for me. So at the end of the day, what did it mean for me? It meant an enormous sense of privilege and responsibility. You know, the JSE is the home to so many businesses, extremely diverse, from the largest AB InBev, as an example, to the very, very smallest companies. We are a home for those entrepreneurs initially to have raised their capital, and for investors now to have be putting their savings. Huge responsibility. But when it comes to what we do, I think we don't represent them, but we are a place people naturally say, well, okay, what is business doing, and how does the JSE provide thought leadership in that regard? It's for that reason that you'll get the EFF coming to March to us, because they're wanting to draw businesses' attention to a particular issue. I think there are a couple of things to think about. The first is that this country at this time has serious issues, and it is in all of our interests, as individuals, as corporates, as politicians, to really lean into the South African condition. It is simply not sustainable for us to complain around our dining room tables and the water coolers. We have to be saying, this matters to us. So business, I think, is actually finally finding its voice as one of the stakeholders, but only one of the stakeholders. You've got individuals, you've got civil society, you've got labor, you've got the political parties. There are many stakeholders in this country who are starting to find their voice. But business too is starting to find its voice and starting to say it matters to us, the manner in which business is done, and and in which policy is set, and where the compass is on certain political decisions. Why should it matter? Because if business is able to do business in a constructive manner, we will be able to grow the economy. If all we are doing in this country right now is to talk about moving the slices of a shrinking pie, we will have failed each other. This is a country with enormous natural resources, incredible people, huge resilience. There is every opportunity for us to grow that pie. And so our mutual responsibility is to talk about how we should be growing that pie. But there's the other side, which I think business is also going to need to focus on. And frankly, it's not a South African thing, it is a global thing, which is the question of inclusive growth, the question of inequality, and the fact that South Africa has such a large Gini coefficient is a real matter of concern. So when you talk about how business does business, I think we've got to move to a world pretty quickly where we really deeply think through what conscious capitalism means. So what is the role of a board in allocating the upside of business? What is the role of an investor? Should they be expecting and driving management to maximizing profits? Or should we rather be saying responsible capitalism, conscious capitalism is about a much more balanced ecosystem, where you look about what your influence is on on your value chain, for instance, how you treat your staff, how you treat your suppliers, etc. That calibration is not just a South African thing, though. This is the reason you see right-wingers starting to get a lot more traction internationally, even in America. Why? Because the economically disenfranchised are screaming, you are not listening to us. Business as usual is failing us. Now, if we have a serious amount of introspection as business, then we should be saying, what's our role in changing that? You do need to look at ownership as a really serious lever to get people out of poverty and up the various income levels. So we do need to ensure that poorer people have more access to property so that they can do things with it and grow, etc. Property comes in many different forms. Your house, your car, your clothes. It also comes in the form of shares. So when we talk about transformation in this country, I think it's really important that we don't just look at employment and we don't just look at where people are living, but we also look at who owns what and what that enables them to do. So if you take the stock exchange as a snapshot of a place where people own things, then the reality of our market, like in many, many markets, is that South Africans at work have pension funds. Those pension funds are their savings. So we all save. We don't really save a lot as South Africans. There's very little saved disposable income in this country. The disposable income will go on people's cars, their things, their food, their cell phones, all right? Very little savings, individual savings. So it shouldn't surprise us that in total, okay, the individuals invested on the stock exchange, it's relatively small, low single-digit numbers, okay? Then you get people's BEE schemes and their family trusts, if they're lucky to come from those levels. There's a certain amount of that. But by far, the bulk of ownership in this country is through mandated investments or pension funds. Now, we shouldn't say that's a terrible thing. We should actually say, isn't it amazing that we're actually managing to have so many people working in a relatively stressed economy? And now let's put emphasis on how those workers' savings are being used. What's the voice behind that? So the black ownership numbers are the ownership numbers when we last published them, and we're about to publish the next lot, but last published them, about 39, let's call it 40 for the purposes of the exercise. 40% of the JSE is owned by foreigners. Is this a good or a bad thing? It's actually a really good thing. Why? It means foreigners say, I'd like to do business in this country. I'd like to trade shares on the JSE, meaning, of course, that many of our companies, they can trade those shares in London, in New York, but they choose to trade them here. That's a good thing because they're using South African traders to trade who are paying income tax. They're using South African asset managers. They're supporting an ecosystem here. 40% foreign. Then we've got the bulk, or the rest of it. 23% owned by black people and 22% owned by white people, and the balance we haven't yet analyzed. And you'll say, well, come on, I mean, you've had so long to analyze it. Line by line, millions of lines of share registers to get to numbers one can verify. Of the 23% owned by black people, 13% are held through the mandated investments, okay? That's up from a couple of years before when we did it, which means more black people are in the workplace, okay? And there are larger numbers of black savings. 10% held directly by black people, BEE schemes, individuals, etc. So I think it's actually a success factor from this government's whole focus on transformation that we have had so many people already owning shares. That is a very different thing, though, from saying that's sufficient. We need to get more people owning shares in broad-based. We really need broad-based transformation. A world in which every single South African says, I have a vested interest in the economy, because I own shares in X company or Y company. That would be where we should go. That's what top economies do. They achieve it in completely different ways, but that's what they do. So we should now be saying the reality is that working South Africans save through their pension funds. But what about the non-working South Africans? How do we get them into the workplace? That's where you start to talk about inclusive growth, etc. And once they're in the workplace, how do we make it easy for them to own the means of production, which are the shares, etc. So we're on a journey. I'm by no means saying the transformation job complete, by no means. But it isn't about, and shouldn't be, about changing the ratios in a shrinking pie. It should be about changing the ratios in a growing pie. So our view on sustainability is that a business, to be sustainable, has to have a plan as to how they will exist in 16 years' time. And you might say, 16? What's this? It's no number. It's not 10, it's not 15. It's a number to make the point that it is far in the future. You've got to have a long-term view about how your business is going to be relevant then. And that means making sure that you've looked at, both what you do, who your stakeholders are, what your pricing is, what the technology is that you use to do what you're doing, in a manner that will enable you to be thriving in 16 years' time. And so in our business, some of that is about, okay, how do we get more global faces to our market? Okay, how do we get bigger global players here? How do we increase the number of non-South African companies listed in South Africa? Why would we want to do that? Because South African institutions need to invest in interesting stocks. South Africans would like to diversify, don't have the opportunity to take their money offshore, so we should bring offshore onshore. We should bring it here. Then it's about technology, making sure all our technology is state-of-the-art, and we're in the tail end of doing some really big and exciting stuff in that. And then it's all going to, ironically, be about risk managing, making sure that when you trade, you know that trade will settle. So it's not the interesting bells and whistles part that traders look at. It's the much more sophisticated, really interesting maths that is going to be, frankly, moved front of house for all financial markets in the future. We call that post-trade. That's going to be a big part of our future. And so will big data, that whole artificial intelligence, the analysis of what we're doing to create interesting insights that allow our clients to do more with us in future. So it's going to be incredibly exciting. We have very big plans for the next 5 years. It is challenging to execute plans like that in a quite turbulent local environment. But business is about the long term. I think it's about being brave to ride the waves of the moment, to say, well, hold on, if that's where we need to go, you've got to make those investments now. That's been my experience, is that we're always making investments when others are a bit fearful to do that. At this moment in time, it's business unusual. And I think there isn't a single model for any given business to say, well, that's what you should be doing, because it will depend on where you are in your maturity as a business and your cycle. I think there is far greater responsibility put on the really large companies and those at the center of policy to be making the point about the types of policies that will be pro-growth and pro-inclusive growth as a focus to getting the country back into investment grade. And there are relatively few people who are in a position to do that, and it is their clear responsibility to stand up and be counted in that regard. On the other hand, each of us, to the extent that we employ people, that we are in the position to motivate people, we're in the position to influence whether or not we are going to close shop or or keep it going even when the times are tough. I think we have to look really hard with a longer term frame in mind, and to say, you know what, real leadership now is going to test our resilience, and how much resilience can we summon up to actually get through this moment, because this moment will pass. And once it is past, those of us that summoned up that resilience, summoned up the stability, will be there when we need to start to take off again. And I would be strongly encouraging people right now to not do rash things. We can all be unhappy. We can all mourn what could have been. But in fact, we've actually got to say, how do we motivate? How do we carry on and motivate in tough times so that at the end, that's where we are all together? I've been lucky enough to work with people who've allowed me the space to be very clear about what my priorities are. And I completely get that when you're at the senior levels, you have more choice and control over that than when you're in a young level. But ironically, I think then it means the senior guys need to set the scope for junior guys. For me, balance is something. My balance will not be your balance, but I'm very clear that my family matters more than my work. And so if I have trade-offs to make, my family will win. Now, if my family was listening to this, they will tell you that that's surprising, because they're forever having interesting and vigorous conversations about whether I've got that trade-off right. We're rebalancing it all the time. But at its core, it is about saying, I have to make space in this barrel of energy that I have for my family, my work, me, and that barrel balance changes regularly. And in my case, me time probably happens very early in the morning or very late at night, when I'm just thinking or cycling or doing something for me. But the busier and more hectic and the more stressed you are, the thing that gives is the me time, in my experience. When my children were very young, I really wanted to be at home with them doing the homework. I can't imagine being on my deathbed and thinking, I would have liked to have done another meeting. I probably would say I would have really liked to be at the boys' play or cricket match or doing or cooking another meal with them. I can't imagine that having another business status would have been important to me, as important to me as it is to be with my family. So that's my calculus. But for other people, it'll be completely different. And it's something you work on every day, every day.